On Tuesday, May 15th of 2018, it was announced that Seattle Mariners second baseman Robinson Cano would be suspended 80 games for violating Major League Baseball's joint drug agreement. The short version of the story states that Cano tested positive for a diuretic. A diuretic is essentially a masking agent, and Major League Baseball was able to prove that he was using the diuretic to cover up some other substance. Cano tested positive for having this diuretic in his system over the offseason. That means he's played the entire year knowing that a potential drug suspension was coming. And then on May 13th, Cano was hit by a pitch in his right hand. It broke his fifth metacarpal, and it was kind of apparent that Cano would miss a significant amount of time. And I think after that came out, Cano decided, I'm not going to appeal this suspension. I'm going to take it on the chin somewhat, and that's what he did. It came out that players can serve their suspension while being on the disabled list. That's something that I fail to understand. It's like taking vacation time from work while being put in jail. I mean, you shouldn't be able to do that. Another part of the suspension that's a little bit head-scratching is that Cano would be ineligible to play in the postseason if the Mariners were to advance that far. It really puts the player in a position of hurting his team twice for committing the same crime. That's something that I see a problem with. I think that if the league wants to move past the issue with the player, if they want to try and put the suspension in the past, you can't allow them to be punished a second time for the wrong that they had done. Let's take some time to talk about what it necessarily means for Robinson Cano as a player and as a person. I think we could start by talking about Robinson Cano's legacy. I mean, Brian Kenny of MLB Network went on record in saying that Robinson Cano is possibly the 10th best second baseman of all time, of the entire history of baseball that I'm pretty sure dates back to the beginning of time. Robinson Cano is the 10th best player to play that position. Pretty much a surefire lock for the Hall of Fame at one point in his career. And now, a day after learning about this suspension, that's in jeopardy. Realistically, that is in jeopardy. I think that people from a younger demographic, people from my generation, look at performance-enhancing drugs a lot differently than people of an older generation. Generations before us thought that the performance enhancers were such an egregious sin that, it was unable to come back from that. And I think growing up, unfortunately, steroids have been a part of baseball, and I think that because of that, my generation is a little bit more numb to it, and I think because of that, they're a little bit more forgiving to performance-enhancing drugs and suspensions surrounding them. The part of the story that really confuses me is how Cano tested positive for this substance during the offseason, and that no one necessarily knew about it until Monday. It was reported that Jerry DiPoto, the general manager of the Seattle Mariners, and the manager, Scott Service, didn't know that Cano was in risk of being suspended and would eventually be suspended until Monday. It seems absurd to me how an issue as big as your star player missing 80 games from the regular season, and you don't know about it? Okay, I get it. I get that, integrity and character coming from a guy who has already been caught for cheating is like expecting a vegetarian to be in a B&E Meats. It's not going to happen. But at the same time, if you were to do this at your job, if you knew you were going to miss work for whatever reason, you would try and tell your bosses or the people in charge as early as you could that you were missing this time. Or at least I would hope, at least I think. The line you got from your parents when they weren't mad, but they were just disappointed? I feel, with this story still being just a day old, both mad and disappointed. The best player on the team selfishly took himself away from the team that, at this point, has a pretty good chance of being in the running for one of those 5 playoff spots. The future definitely looks very different for the Seattle Mariners moving forward. Now let's talk about the Seattle Mariners moving forward. Robinson Cano, obviously gone until about mid-August. If this were to happen in any other year that Robinson Cano has been with the Mariners, you'd probably consider this to be the end of their season. However, I think that this year is different. I think offensively, they have plenty of firepower even without Robinson Cano. Ironically or not, they have a Gold Glove second baseman on this team, only he's been playing center field because Robinson Cano has been a part of this team. Now without Robinson Cano, D. Gordon, who was playing center field, is now going to slide down to second base and take over the duties more regularly in the middle of the infield over there at second base, and a regular outfielder in Guillermo Heredia will take over most of the work out there in center field. Defensively, the lack of Robinson Cano doesn't take much away. I think offensively, despite the firepower that we just talked about, offensively, you're going to see the biggest drop-off with essentially Guillermo Heredia hitting for Robinson Cano. One, I guess, silver lining, if you can find one in this story, is that Robinson Cano won't be paid for the time that he's missed. And in 80 games, Robinson Cano is going to lose out on what is essentially $11 million. He is paid an absolutely absurd amount of money to play baseball for the Seattle Mariners. And now that he's not, the team gets that $11 million. So you could potentially see them near the trade line or near the middle of the season try and eat a bad contract from another team and get a pitcher that they desperately need. Maybe they try and find a bat that belongs in the outfield and try and figure out that situation. But they do have a little extra wiggle room in this season with Robinson Cano missing out on paychecks because of this drug suspension. Overall, it's a very frustrating, it's a very disappointing, and it's a very maddening subject that Robinson Cano is now not a part of this team, and mostly by his own doing. The statement that he came out with was just like every other statement that any other athlete who has been caught breaking the rules could write. I mean, I probably could have written that statement. The closing line from Robinson Cano's statement says that I obviously now wish that I had been more careful. Yeah, duh. I think that everybody wishes Robinson Cano would have been a little bit more careful. So like I said, this is a tough situation for the Seattle Mariners. It's a reputation ruining, reputation tarnishing situation for Robinson Cano. And it just, I mean, there's no good words to say about it. It is a frustrating time to be a Seattle Mariners fan. And partly because the team has been excellent through the first month and a half of the season. They've exceeded expectations. That they're playing winning baseball. They're fun to watch. And their best player took himself out of the game to stay competitive, to stay relevant. We still don't really know. It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see how Robinson Cano is received when he gets back with the team in August. Be interesting to see what General Manager Jerry DiPoto decides to do as far as roster moves to try and make up for the absence of Robinson Cano. It'll all be worth watching as the season progresses, and I'll be right there trying to check out what goes down with the Seattle Mariners as they move on without Robinson Cano because of a performance-enhancing drug suspension.